Hi, welcome to After the Well, a conversational podcast where my guest and I explore life-transforming encounters with faith, inspired by the woman at the well. Join me, Melissa Lapin, as we discover the power of belief, redemption, and spiritual refreshment. Subscribe now and embark on a journey of inspiration and transformation. See you at the well. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of After the Well, and today I have my friend Jenni Peters on here, and I'm stupid excited to have Jenni on here. I have been we've been friends since 2010, 2011, first year Bethel.
2012.
2012, yeah. So
No, you're right, 2010.
Yeah, because I started school year 2010-11.
Yep.
Been to Africa together.
Yeah.
That was fun. But
Challenging.
Girlfriend, it was so challenging when you're going with a person who doesn't even know where Cameroon is. I was like, are you kidding me? Why are you on this plane? But anyway, that's another podcast. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here, Jenni, is first you can introduce yourself a little bit, but I love your heart for prayer and intercession. And just, I think I would like to kind of maybe talk a little bit about prayer and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like and, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Let's use that as our jumping off point and see where God takes us. But introduce yourself first.
My name is Jenni Peters, and like Melissa said, we met at first year School of Ministry, Bethel, Atlanta. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I have 3 adult children, shockingly enough. All adults, 1 getting married, 2 still living with me. My husband was in the military, and we traveled all over. And
I don't think I knew that. I don't think I knew Nick was in the military.
He was. He did 8 years in the military.
Okay.
So,
what branch?
Army.
Okay.
And so, like, as he was going, it's like every place that God took us. Well, he was in the military, but God was making our orders. I mean, literally every time he was on orders, his orders changed before we were able to get to where we were supposed to go. Every time, without fail, we were redirected. And so that was kind of cool. And each time, I think we went to a little more kingdom-minded church each move we made. So it was just a really long and cool progression to where he brought us. So we were in Alaska or Arizona, and then Georgia for school, and then Alaska. And when we got out of the military in Alaska, we stayed put and youth pastored there for a while. And that's where our connection with Bethel Redding came. And so when the grace to be in Alaska lifted, which it did very suddenly, and we were done there, we basically had you can live anywhere you want as long as it's within an hour of a major airport. So that's how we ended up in Atlanta, which in and of itself is a crazy story. So.
Yeah, right? So backing up to the beginning, did you guys have, because you talked about God in the military before that, did you have faith? Did you grow up with faith?
Yes.
And
so my dad, I grew up in a Baptist, my dad was a Baptist pastor. When I was probably 4 or 5 years old, he left the church. And I think I started walking to church when I was like 12. We had a little church on the corner, and it wasn't too long after that my dad found his way back to God, rededicated his life, and my family started going to church, but I was actually the first one to start going back. And it was yeah. So Nick and I met in high school, and we were just, you know, typical teenagers. Definitely, I had a faith. I continued to go to church. He was coming from a Methodist background, so I don't think that he had never, in the church he was in, he had never heard the gospel, and so I think it was
Wow.
my pastor who shared that with him, and he got saved. I think when we were probably his senior year, but I don't think either one of us really um, made a full on commitment to Christ until I guess um, it would have been probably 92, May of 1992. And I mean, we had been engaged for quite a while at that point, and he had communicated to me that he was going to get his PhD before we got married, and I was like, I'm out. So, but that was because just we weren't living the way that I knew that we needed to be living, and so yeah.
So what was the draw? Like as a 12-year-old, you're like, I'm gonna walk myself to church. Y'all heathens can stay home. You know, what was it in your heart that drew you?
Honestly, I had a friend that was doing the same thing,
Okay.
and I can't say that I would ever step foot in that church again,
Yeah.
personally. Um,
But it kept you
but
connected
it
to
did.
to
It
God.
did. And
Yeah.
so that friend and she'd walk to my house, and then we'd walk from there every Sunday. And I think her parents made her go. And I just went, and yeah.
Yeah. I have a thought just encouraging to us and the listeners that, because you said you would never go there again. And that happens a lot, especially nowadays with everyone deconstructing their faith and walking away and church hurt, quote, church hurt, and just all the BS and the politics and all the things of church. And people have just written it off. But I think to some degree, to some degree, I think there's a lot of spiritual benefit to staying somewhere that you're not comfortable, because
Mm-hmm.
then it challenges you to go, okay, God, why am I so uncomfortable?
Right.
What else is there? What more is there? It can be like that launching pad.
Mm-hmm.
Just because for me, being at a place where, um, being part of a church, knowing that that particular church is not where I get fed,
Right.
but
Right.
being there to serve and to be a light to others,
Mm-hmm.
and then, but like you said about Alaska, when the grace is gone, the grace is gone. Like,
Right.
you just know, it's like, all right, God, change my heart or change the situation. He's like, okay, get out. And we're like, okay, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, for those of you just questioning or just totally unhappy with where you are, but you still want to be connected to just a congregation, just a fellowship, a community, because when we go places, we should make friends. And so a lot of
Right.
us have friends at specific churches, but for whatever reason, the teaching is not okay, or the kids' ministry isn't adequate for your family needs and that kind of thing. But make a list and stop and have that conversation with Holy Spirit. It's like, okay, Holy Spirit, why am I discontent? Instead of just walking away and throwing your hands up and like, well, church sucks, I quit. That's what a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I would just challenge you guys to dig in, suffer through the suck, as I throw up my air quotes, and really have those hard conversations. Okay, God, what is it that I need?
Right.
Okay, this is not satisfying me right now. Why? Is it me? Is it them? Is it a mixture of both? Because it can be a really great opportunity for growth. But as a society as a whole, we're just too quick to walk away,
Right.
you know?
And I think it's important to consider, like in this situation, it was the closest church to me, just the denomination was not foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I said I wouldn't go back, it's just not a church I would choose today. However, had that church not been there, there wouldn't have been the seeds that were needed for the next
Right.
church and the next church. And the same is true the entire time we were in the military. As God moved us from church to church, had I not been to the church in Arizona, I probably never would have stepped foot in the church in Augusta. And then I have no doubt in my mind, had I not been in Augusta, and it was a very short period of time, it was 6 months, I would never have stayed. In fact, I almost didn't stay at the church in Alaska, but I literally heard the Lord. I went and got a drink out of the water, and He said, "You're home." I heard it as clear.
Hmm.
I mean, it wasn't audible, but I heard it so clear, and He had to tell me that because I had some belief systems. And at the time when we arrived, there was the pastor had just passed away. The church was hurting. The church was broken. And his wife was stepping in while they were looking for a pastor. And at the time in my life, I had just been in a place where where I still believed it was not okay for women to be in the pulpit. Like
Hmm.
that's how I was raised. Was how the other churches were. Probably not the one in Augusta. Um, but I feel like in Augusta, I learned to hear God at a different capacity that maybe had I not been through those progressions. So each place that you do go, you're gaining. You're gaining seeds, even if you don't feel like you're gaining,
Yeah.
you're gaining. There's seeds that are planted in each of the doors that God is opening, be it in your own heart or in your family or with relationships that He's broadening your understanding, of who He is. And without those stair steps, I don't know. I just look back at each of those churches. Probably most of them I probably wouldn't attend today. A couple of them I still would. But like, where would I be without him? I wouldn't have got where I was. It's like, I tell my kids all the time, I wouldn't change a thing about my relationship with my husband. So why? Because have we made mistakes? We've made a ton of mistakes, but I wouldn't change those mistakes because those mistakes have developed me into who I am today. And I feel like, how can we be any different with our relationship with the Lord? Are there seasons in which I wish I had been closer or drawn closer or not gotten angry or whatever with the Lord? I'm
Which
being
is
real.
completely valid. If y'all have to scream at the sky, you go right ahead, cuss, hit trees. God, why? Because He already knows you're feeling that way. You might as
Right.
well just get it over with.
Right. But it's just the same thing. Like, my progression of faith, I wouldn't go back and change because it's created who I am today. I mean, I say that, and it's easier said than actually believing in my own heart
Mm-hmm.
because there are things that I wish I could go back and say, gosh, if I had in fact, I was driving down the road the other day and we had listened to they had done a new song. It's probably not new, but it was new to me. And the first few lines are, when did I stop believing in miracles? When it was something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines. I can't think of what it's called. You're not done with me yet is what it's called. And I just put it on repeat because we're coming out of a season of our faith being really, really challenged. Um, just with some of the things we've walked through with our kids being called heretics and idolaters, and just really having our faith shaken by people who really didn't know us at all and never asked us what we believed, but instead told us what we believed. And there was no opportunity to have a conversation, but the hurt was so deep in my child. And I remember I remember the day that she encountered this family, and I remember it's in my journal, and it was, God, protect her heart. If this isn't it, protect her heart because she can't handle another heartbreak. And this heartbreak was something so deep in all of us. It affected all five of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, her most of all, probably Nick and I second to that. But and I was kind of driving down the road listening to that, and I was thinking, oh, I know exactly when that happened, when I stopped believing, when I started doubting, when I started, and I was driving and I was listening to the song and I was worshiping, and I was like, in spite of that, in spite of that, in spite of me being angry for a year and a half, not at any person in particular, save God alone, and processing, well, that's okay. He knew, I was disappointed. My heart was let down. And I was thinking to myself, God, if I had have been praying for my kids in that time frame the way I used to pray for my kids, but I wasn't because I was angry with you, where would they be now? Like, how much better off would they be? And he immediately showed me my daughter's life, and she's attending a church right now where she's gotten into a New Testament class. She is growing by leaps and bounds, and she knows what she believes and who she is in Christ now in a way that she didn't know. And I thought, gosh, if she hadn't walked through this, she wouldn't be where she was. If she hadn't, it shook her faith so to the core that she really didn't know what she believed for probably 18 months. And then she just started digging. And in spite of my not refusal, but just not praying as much as I would have before that, he was there. He was there for her. And he has done a much better job than I ever could have, I mean, and he was just very quick to remind me, he's faithful. He's not, it doesn't depend on what I am or am not doing. And whether or not I have dealt with, what in this case, I was extremely offended at God, not at people. This wasn't church. That was just straight up, I asked you to protect her and you didn't, or at least I didn't think you did. But
and that's what it comes down to, is like our perspective. And it's like, God, and you and I both know, because we just have just really good kingdom theology, that God doesn't make things happen, but he sure will use something. And that sometimes I don't know that we, like, especially as a mom or a parent, we want to save our kids from that. Got to protect their, because that's like right now is our granddaughter, Annalise. She is with us a lot, and her home life is very different than and so that's just my prayer for her is, God, just protect her little heart, little heart, because I know that I cannot force my will on my kid. And even if she was my kid, there's still balance in that. They've still got to, if God's not a control freak, I shouldn't be either. But man, there's nothing more fierce than a mama's heart. When we want the best for our kids. And, but it's sitting back and watching the beauty of God unfold in someone else's life. You sit back and go, okay, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I judged. I'm sorry I was angry. I'm sorry. You know what you're doing.
She's happier, healthier, spiritually, definitely healthier than she's been. And if I had have had my way, what I thought was best, she'd probably be in an abusive marriage relationship. So he knew. He knew.
He saves us from ourselves all the time.
He does.
It's like, oops, I missed that one, didn't I, God? And he's like, but I got your back.
Yeah. So that's been my realization the last little bit of, oh gosh.
So in that, even being angry at God or, just frustrated or whatever, because I get that way too. Like, because I have promises. I have promises about my children. but ain't neither one of them fulfilling that promise yet. It's like, damn it, come on. Don't you know what God wants you to do? You know, and they've got
Right.
church hurt. They both have church hurt, big time. They're blaming it on the church, even though it was just an individual. We all know that. But what were there, even in your anger and your emotions and your frustration, were there promises? Was there a promise? Was there a prophetic word? Was there something in your gut that just kept you anchored to, okay, God, this is a crap situation, but I love you anyway. I'm angry at you, but I love you anyway.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I mean, yes, for sure. It's not, I don't think that at any point I walked away from him wholly. I mean, I was mad and I dealt with a lot of anger. My journals are, well, they're probably sitting right here. I won't read them. Yikes. But like there was a lot of venting, and I think wasn't until I think it was Terry said to me, it's okay. It's okay for you and you need to forgive God for disappointing you. I was like, hold up. That messes with everything that I feel like feels right in me. What do you mean? And she was like, well, you had an expectation that wasn't met. You need to forgive that wasn't met. But it's not like he needs my forgiveness. But does that? I'm not really making sense.
You make absolute sense, and I hear what you're saying, and I hear what she's saying, and I absolutely disagree with that. Like forgiving God for not meeting I'm like, God doesn't have to meet my expectations,
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't. But so, at the same time, bringing myself to a point where I could say, okay,
shouldn't you forgive
maybe
yourself?
More myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And see, and that's the thing. I think I get, because I've had several people say that to me, like, when I did Sozo training, like we trained other people, and there was somebody that said in a session, and I about lost my mind. She's like, well, forgive God for not doing that. I'm like, God's not required, and it was like
it's more, it really is more of forgiving myself.
Yeah. For that expectation. For the wrong expectation, or a not so good expectation. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
Well, and really, aren't we? It really would be more of a forgiving myself for not trusting, for putting him in a box.
Exactly.
For saying this is what it's going to take for you to protect her heart, which is what I did. Yeah. I mean, it was get this dude out of her life before she can get attached to him. So her heart won't, that's how we protect her heart. Instead of really what he did was he allowed that situation to play out. And I mean, there was no God in a lot of what she went through. None.
Yeah.
But she, but on the other side of her, that's what I was going to say. I think that I was seeing protect her heart. She's not strong enough, when in reality, she's the strongest person that I know. And I had no idea. And what a gift to be able to see that strength that I wouldn't have seen any other way. I don't know anybody who could, in my personal relationships, that could have walked through that and come out on the other side the way she has. It wasn't fun. It was ugly. It was not fun.
Yeah, you shared a little bit, and it was nasty. And we sort of kind of went through a little bit the same thing with our son and his now ex-wife and their family, who are high profile, and tried to get him kicked out of school. I mean, like, the crap they did, and we're like, and you do this in Jesus' name? I mean, come on.
Right.
But
yeah. But yeah, so it's just a process, really, of, there was never a point, there were some quiet times when things were really bad, as literally years went by, and I was waiting for her healing and waiting for him. But also, I don't know that I was waiting for him as much as I was waiting for her to yield to him, and I was viewing it as I was waiting for him to act on her behalf, when in reality, I think he was waiting for her to run to him.
Yeah.
And the moment she turned her face to him, I
He's
mean,
standing right there.
she
Yeah.
collided, and
Yeah.
it was instantaneous. I mean, the person that I live with now is 180 degrees from the person I lived with a year ago. I mean, 180 degrees. And so I think we have a tendency to take our hurt and attribute it to God
Oh, sure
and
we do.
attribute his timing and everything, when in reality, he wasn't, he really wasn't the one that I was waiting on. I was waiting on her to figure out
Mm-hmm.
that he really was worth it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that she was worth it, because that was definitely her self-esteem was shot. And it took her realizing that she had value, and that realization of her having value led her right back into his arms. And literally, I wish I could communicate. I left and went to Oregon for 3 months and came home to a different child. It literally was that
And maybe God needed
drastic.
you to do that too.
Maybe.
So, okay, Jenni, you need to get out of the way, but here's the blessing of living on the coast and having this gorgeous experience. Oh my God, I hated you for 3 months because I'm like, why can't you exile me to Oregon? But no, but seriously though, yeah, I'm really happy for her. But that goes, also circling back to being disgruntled with your church and not happy. And just like when you sit with God, you learn to ask really good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, God, what am I missing?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of, a lot of people are just like, why, God, why? And God's like, maybe you're asking the wrong question, because I want to say, why, Jenni, why? Or
Right.
why, Melissa, why? And going, okay, God, show me this situation through your eyes. Help me see. And I know, like I said, we've gone to school together, and I know you, and know that you do that too. But sometimes even our emotions get in the way, and
Yep.
we get caught in that anger or depression or like that anxiety, and it all comes down to trust.
For sure.
We don't trust God, we get angry. We don't trust God, we have this anxiety. We don't trust God, we get depressed. And so being able to have that it's okay to ask God questions. People listening, understand that.
Right.
It's okay to ask questions. God is ready to answer. He's got all the answers to the questions. He will even tell you the questions to ask if you just say, God, what do you want me to know? What do I need to learn? What do I need to hear? How do I need to see this? Can you show me? Can I see this person through your eyes? Can I see this situation through your eyes? But we normally, that's just not our norm. That's not our go-to.
Right.
We just want it fixed.
Yeah.
We don't like what we see, and we want it fixed.
Yeah.
And then we get pissy when it's not fixed, or we get depressed when it's not fixed, because we get let down because of all those expectations. So, which is why it's so important to have emotional intelligence and to just be healthy emotionally, which a lot of church doesn't allow you to do, because, oh, you're depressed, you just need to pray more, or your faith, you gotta have stronger faith, you gotta have stronger, be like, no, I just need somebody to talk to.
Right.
It has nothing to do with faith. God didn't go anywhere. I still believe in God, but I am a human being with human physiology, and I need to process this out.
Right.
Not just throw scripture at me, or that kind of thing. And so yeah, that's my little rant. It's my podcast. I can rant if I want. That's funny. So where's your heart now? Are you still mad at God?
No. And I think
good.
I haven't been for quite some time. I actually got over it before. I mean, before she ever started into counseling and that kind of stuff. So I went through, I think it was about a year. And even in that time, I don't think it really, I mean, it definitely affected my prayer life in that, I mean, I still had quiet times and stuff. I would liken it to a unresolved argument inside a marriage. You
Sure,
don't,
sure.
it's going to affect the intimacy. It's going to affect the depth. And I don't feel like that's ever really on God. I mean, I really feel like that's on us. Like, what was I offended by?
Mm-hmm.
I was offended that he didn't do what I wanted him to do, essentially. And that's what I had to get over. I had to let that go and trust him. I mean, it really came down, like you said, to trust. It really does. Back when I was on an intercession team, I remember we were at Moravian Falls, and God spoke to me so clearly. I had 3 kids going 15 different directions every night in all of their activities. I spent 6 hours a day probably in the car running them here and there because, of course, none of them had driver's license. So that was handy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the Lord speaking to me and telling me so much of trust is rest and so much of rest is trust, because I
Mm.
found myself so tired, and I was like, I just need to rest. And that was his response. I think it actually was flipped the other way. It was so much of rest is trust and so much of trust is rest. Like, you can't separate the two. You can't, because you'll never fully rest without trust, and you'll never trust without resting, not fully. And so
That's
it
good. That'll
really,
preach right there.
yeah. I
Good.
mean, he gave me a big long thing about it. I just don't have that journal handy. Otherwise, I'd probably share it. Just, it was a really impactful, and it's always really stuck with me. And I just hit this season where I wasn't resting or trusting.
Yeah.
Resting in the knowledge that he knew better than I how to take care of my daughter, or trusting the fact that, you know, this was not his doing. There were choices in it. And that's the other thing. I think sometimes we get so offended with the way the Lord works, or the timing that he works in, that we forget that maybe we should go back and ask the questions of, where's my responsibility in this?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm honest with myself, and my daughter would tell you the same thing, if she's honest with herself, I just lost my earbud. Now, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
It's okay.
If I think, what was I saying? Dog on it.
The responsibility, personal responsibility.
Oh, I think
If you're honest.
if we're both honest with ourselves, and
Yeah.
probably my husband too, there were some red flags that we all chose to ignore in the excitement of the moment, in the hope of something that, we knew that she wanted so desperately. And
Because she actually got engaged, right?
she was engaged, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. She was engaged very, very briefly. It lasted about 3 weeks before all the true
Shit hit the
colors came
fan.
out.
It's an adult podcast. We can say that shit hit the
Actually,
fan.
it wasn't even the true colors. Being honest, it wasn't the true colors of the young man. More so his
Yeah.
family. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's really important when you find those points that you're frustrated with God, or you're struggling with his timing, that you go back and, ask yourself some of the tough questions. What's my responsibility here? Even in a situation that I'm in now, it's, oh, here's my dog.
It's fine.
Even in this, there's a situation that I'm in now where, I was frustrated, and what's my responsibility in this situation? And the truth of the matter is, my responsibility in this situation, and the place that I can, it also as a child, can best help that child, is on my knees. I'm going to be most effective in this situation by not sharing my opinion, by not forcing my opinion or my will or my way, but most effective in praying for peace, praying for unity, praying for joy, And so I think that's where you just get to the point where you got to figure out, okay, in this situation, I have the choice to be super offended, but what's my responsibility here? It's not always going to be prayer. It might be healthy communication. It might be confrontation. It might be, you just have to figure out what is your responsibility in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's good, but we don't get those answers until we trust God enough to have that conversation.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and to sit and go, okay, God, this is how I'm feeling. What do you want me to do about it?
Right.
What are you saying about this? You know, and because they're, God, and I'm sure you've heard them too. I've been part of intercessor groups and prayer groups and prayed with friends for, quote, the prodigal kids. And I'm like, everything that came out of your mouth was your desire for that child. You know, it's like you never once asked God what he wanted.
Right.
You know? And we do that. We pray our will so often. God, just bring them here and just let them take this job or let them have this relationship or, you know, all the things that we do. And it's just like, God's like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I appreciated that most about my mom. You know, we never lived close. And that was always very hard. And my mom would always tell me, I would rather have you in Alaska, 6,000 miles away, right in the center of God's will, than right next door. You know?
Yeah. Where'd you grow up?
In Illinois.
Oh, that's right. I think I remember. Yeah, that's right. And your mom just passed, didn't she?
Yep. About a year, a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. I remember that. Oh, you're a good daughter. All the trips you took back and
I did take a lot of trips back. But that made it, I was bound and determined to have no regrets.
You know, sometimes we just got to do what we got to do.
Yep.
We have to lay aside our own comfort and just suck it up and embrace it and do what we need to do.
Yeah.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something that people in this country are too keen on nowadays.
Not really.
I'm going to cancel you. I didn't do anything, you know? So in that, as we are winding down, what's some advice or some encouragement around this whole subject of not even just parenting, but being, you know, personal responsibility, emotions with God, and, you know, prayer and walking through that. And I like that you did state that, you know, even though you were angry at God, you never stopped talking to him.
Right.
You know? So what would be some encouragement?
I feel like if I got to that point, I literally feel like I would die. Like, where would the hope be?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's good.
Completely and totally lost all hope. And I knew that I could consciously have that conversation in my head that if I let this go, which was a temptation in that, because there was so much pain involved, I knew I would find myself without hope. It literally was, where would I be?
Okay, so let me back up and ask a different question then. In this, because, you know, we're talking about our well moments and things. What is it about your conversations? Because, like, I've known you for a long time, and you've always been an intercessor, and I freaking love the way you pray, and I love the perspective you have and the things that you pray. What is it about your relationship with the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, like with the Godhead? What is it about your relationship that keeps you, like, as a laid down lover? Because that's how I see you. You've always been so humble. You've never taken intercession like, if I don't pray, the world's going to crash tomorrow, you know, because there are those people like that. It's like they think they take it as a militant duty that they have to do this, you know? It makes them a good Christian because they pray all this stuff.
Right.
But I've never observed that with you. It's always been this, hey, I'm gonna go hang out with the guys, you know? And it's just been a very natural thing for you. What is it about your time that just keeps you hungry for it?
That's a really good question.
Thank you very much.
I think I would say probably, really, for lack of a better way to say it, is I remember what it was like when I didn't have him.
Okay.
And I don't want to go back there. You know, and that wasn't like I obviously I grew up mostly in a Christian home. I watched a lot of things happen. And I don't know, maybe if I'm even being a little honest, I saw the decisions that my dad made when he walked away that changed the course of some of my siblings' lives. And maybe it's even out of the fear of not wanting to have that. And I mean, I'm just being real. It's not super spiritual to say. Part of it is, I mean, I'd love to say it's because every time I meet with God, I have an encounter, and every time, but that's just simply not true. I mean,
right.
I wish it was. I mean, I do encounter him every time in some way, shape, or form, be it in the car or whatever, probably most often when I'm in the car, because that's when as long as nobody's with me, because I don't tend to typically listen to music. So that's when I'm either having conversations with people in my family while I drive, or it's just quiet. And, or when I take a walk, those are probably even more so. This room, it used to be Caleb's room. It's now my whimsy room. I redecorated it. This is where I do my quiet time, and I call it my whimsy room. And God has met me here, but more often than not, it's when I'm on a walk, or when I'm driving down the road, or when I see something, or encounter someone. And I just don't want to imagine my life without those. Even in the seasons of my life when I feel like they're few and far between, the idea that, I don't know, the idea to not have that in my life it's making me tear up, because I don't want to live there. I don't want to go there. And yeah, it's not a place I want to be. And it's not so much that I have these supernatural encounters with God all the time. It's just that I don't want a life without him. I don't want to think about a life with no hope, or a life that is completely, heaven forbid, dependent on my choices, because I've already demonstrated in this conversation how well I would do in that situation, So I don't know if that answers your question per se, but I don't know that it's necessarily like, it's just, I don't want to be without it. It's not so much that there's something that I feel like in particular about my relationship with him that draws me back. I guess if I had to say one thing, it would be hope. Like, I can't imagine my life without the hope of Christ in it.
It's just like when you're married and your relationship is like, I can't imagine not being without Scott. Like, you can't imagine not being without Nick.
Right.
And tell him to make his appointment, because I want to interview him.
He was more nervous than I was, truth be told.
I know, that's what he said. So he needs to.
He was actually surprised. He was like, "You made it? You made it?" And I was like, "I did. I did." And he was like, "Really?" He was shocked.
That's funny, but it's like that.
Because it is super out of character for me.
Yeah, but nah, it's just tell him it's okay. It's just a conversation.
I will tell him.
Nobody died. But But yeah, so I feel the same way. I do not feel religious compulsion to pray
Right.
or to quote have a routine or whatever. I just enjoy knowing that I get the privilege and honor of hanging out with the Godhead.
Mm-hmm.
That is my inheritance. That is
Mm-hmm.
my right as a daughter of God.
Right.
It doesn't have to look like anything, because like most of my time was when I'm hiking,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm a lot of times, like yesterday I was in my studio and I had no music on, no TV in the background, because sometimes I just want voice, I
Right.
want something. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks or podcasts, not necessarily TV or movies or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
just voice, just to have a voice. And there's quite a few times though, nothing. It's just silence, and I'm just there.
Right.
And I'm creating, and I'm thinking, and sometimes, like the cloud of witnesses have showed up, and I have had encounters, and I'm like, okay, I just felt somebody come in the room and stand behind me, and then I just like, okay, who are you?
Yeah.
And just have that conversation. Fully legal. It's not necromancy, people. It's all in the Bible. If you're listening and you think I'm weird now, it's completely legal and valid to interact with the cloud of witnesses. But yeah, just like you said, like that hope,
Mm-hmm.
like and the rest and the peace comes in that too.
Right.
It's like that people are just like, you do so much, or like I post stuff on Facebook or whatever, but I'm not busy,
Right.
but then I stop and I look and I'm like, crap, I did a lot this week. But it's because I live from a place of rest,
Mm. Yeah.
and I don't allow things in my schedule. I protect my time,
Mm-hmm.
I can say no.
Right.
And a lot of times I do, there's 4 things that it has to line up with. And if whatever comes up doesn't fall into one of those 4 categories, nope. And that's for someone who's fairly extroverted, that's been really hard.
It's not hard for me.
But
I'm an introvert.
yeah, my introvert extrovert are less than 1% each from each other, which is like
Really?
rare in itself. So
Yeah,
I
that
can
is.
be either or.
Yeah.
But like there are times when I'll go sit at a coffee shop just to be around people. Don't talk to me, and I hate coffee. I just go sit somewhere. I'll go to a
Same.
restaurant. I'll just go to a restaurant and sit and put headphones in and watch a movie
So that you
while I
can
eat
be
lunch.
near other people.
So I can be. I don't want to talk to you.
I don't understand that life.
But yeah, and the
I mean,
same
I
thing
love
with
people and I love being with
yeah.
people sometimes.
Yeah,
No,
I don't do it
love
all the
people
time.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah, not all people. Not all people all the time.
I'm supposed to.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know. I'll leave that one up to God. He and I can talk about it another time. I think that verse is translated wrong.
That's convenient.
Was that Old Testament? No, I'm just kidding. So circling back around to the question, get me off the hook here. What's some advice, what's some encouragement you'd leave with people on how to find that rest and trust and
I think it's just finding those moments through the day. I mean, obviously, if you have the time, if you have the opportunity, having that journaling does help quite a bit. And like I said, some of my journaling is sometimes it's just my prayer over, be it my kids, my family, church, the nation, whatever. Sometimes my quiet time looks very much like a venting session sometimes, but just finding those moments and maybe even in the midst of your day, shutting off the music, shutting off, even worship music. For me, sometimes I even have to shut off the worship music just to have it quiet. We live in such a world that's so loud all the time.
constant stimulation?
Yep.
Yeah.
And finding those moments of just quiet. To give God the opportunity to speak, I think would be key. And then learning to hear his voice, and that's a time thing. And even now, I mean, sometimes it's like, okay, is that my voice or is that your voice?
Mm-hmm.
And really, testing that, to see whether it is me or him. But I think that would be just positioning yourself, I guess, essentially positioning yourself in a place where you can hear, where you can rest, where you can learn to trust. And really, maybe one of the best ways to learn to trust is to be obedient. I love that word.
You're gonna say nobody likes that word. They just turned it off. Like, here they go and ran about obedience. On that note, bye, Jenni.
I feel like there's something God is asking me to do right now, and I am not very keen on it. And but I know the benefits that'll be on the other side, because in the past, where he's asked me to be obedient, he's been faithful, and it's always come out in my favor. And I think that type of thing develops trust in a way that maybe other things cannot. Or stepping out in faith and saying, okay, this is beyond me. This is something I can't do. Whether it's, giving more than what you think you can give, or just believing, like, okay, there's been multiple times where Nick has, lost his job, or just the nature of the work that he does, they get what they need, and Silicon Valley companies are great for that. They get what they need and they move on. And so, but I remember in May when his position was strategically eliminated overnight, looking at him, and the initial shock was, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay our bills? How are we going to? I mean, he is the only income that we have, and so, the initial first 10 or 15 minutes, but I was with a friend when I found out, and she grabbed my hands and we prayed, and then it was just like, this isn't my responsibility. And I had to remind Nick immediately, this isn't your responsibility. We get this idea that it's my job as the man to provide, but really it's God's job to provide.
Come on.
And I think that we were able very quickly that time, because of other times of being obedient and resting in him and trusting him to come through, that it was in that season, for whatever reason, it was easy. It's not always, but in that moment, it was easy to look at each other and say, okay, God's got this. It's no big deal. And maybe, I don't know if it would have happened. I mean, he had a job in less than a week, so it wasn't like...
Don't tell his podcast. Let him tell the story.
So I think it's just a matter of, I think sometimes obedience is a key.
Well, I mean,
that's a very unpopular opinion.
and it is because you have to trust before you can see that he's trustworthy.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
And we don't like that.
Mm-mm.
We don't like that. We don't like
But that's true in
not
every relationship.
Having answers. Right.
It's true in every relationship.
We have to give people opportunity to fail.
Yep.
Because, but with God, he's never ever going to fail.
Right.
It might not look like what we think it's gonna, because we have those expectations and stuff. But the more we trust him, the more times over and over and over again, you're just like, meh, God's got this. God's got this.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, it's a little unnerving because you're like, there's no income,
right.
Will there be another pandemic right now?
Right.
We have an election year coming up. What's going to happen?
Right.
All the questions. But even in that, there's that hope.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've been intentional to cultivate that.
Right.
And where there's hope, there's trust, because you got to have something to hope in.
Mm-hmm.
That is the definition of hope, the biblical definition. It's actually an active word, and hope is actually a poor translation of the word.
Right.
I did a word study on it once, but it's an action word that it's like I know something's cool's gonna happen, basically.
Right.
Versus hope, because people are like, I hope so. That's not biblical hope. I'm not saying you didn't have it,
right.
You know what I'm saying, but people are like, they're always, I hope so. But, well, my friend, I think that is going to wrap it up. I think it's a good place to land.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
See, wasn't so bad. So, I do want to say to everybody listening, thank you if this is your first time. If this is not your first time listening to one of our episodes, thanks for coming back. And I would ask that either way that you guys rate us, like us, love us, share us on whatever platform you engaged with it. If you have any questions for me, information and links to me, email address, will be in the show notes. And yeah, I think that's it. So trust and rest and rest and trust. Thanks, Jenni.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After the Well. We hope this conversation has left you inspired, encouraged, and spiritually refreshed. Remember, just like the woman at the well, your encounters with faith can lead to remarkable transformation. Be sure to subscribe for more uplifting stories, and may your journey be filled with hope, grace, and a deep sense of purpose. Until next time, stay refreshed and keep believing in the power of transformation.